Just a quick intro for those unaware. My name's Dan Stainsby. I'm Deputy Managing Director of the broadcast specialist Marketeers. I also chair the broadcast group on behalf of the ESG Council. We do about 4 of these events every year, so that intro is very much for those that have been unable to join. And today, as you've probably seen from the copy, the event today will focus very much on climate change, sustainability, and broadcast programming. I think it looks like we're up to a steady number now, so we will crack on. Thank you very much for your time. So, as I mentioned, I think in the copy which promoted the event, the UN has called climate change the defining issue of our time, and it's never far from headline news. Just in the last 24 hours, I think I've seen that the state of Western Australia has confirmed that it will end native forest logging at the start of 2024, whilst the National Audit Office here in the UK has said that the Green Homes Grant was quote unquote set up to fail. So lots going on just in the last 24 hours alone. The PR sector has an incredible opportunity to keep audiences informed and encourage positive behavioural change to help avert or minimise the impact of climate disaster, which is hopefully why we're all here today. We did some research at Marketeers. For those that are unaware, we actually have a research agency within our group called Opinion Matters. Did a bit of research a week ago just to have a look at actually how influential broadcast media can be in terms of encouraging that positive behavioural change. And the headline findings were that 58% of people in the UK said that they have changed their behaviour to be more environmentally sustainable because of something they saw on the TV, heard on the radio, or heard on a podcast. 3 in 10 said that they have done so in the last 12 months because of something they saw on the TV, and 1 in 6 said the same about radio. So broadcast can be influential, can also be a great platform, obviously, for brand comms as well. Joining me today to talk about this topic is the wonderful Liv Thwaites, making her broadcast PRCA event debut. Liv works with me at Marketeers and has a great deal of experience working on sustainability-oriented projects over the last year and beyond. And also, I'm very, very excited to say Tessa McCann joins us from CNBC, one of the most reputable broadcast brands in the world. Tessa's going to talk to us in a moment about what CNBC have been up to. In April, for example, they launched the Pioneering Sustainable Future, giving its influential audience unparalleled and regular access to how big businesses are accelerating their action to tackle climate change. So something which I think will be very, very interesting to most, if not all of you on this session. Tessa is also going to be available, as is Liv, for a Q&A at the end. But before then, I want to go to Liv, please, to tell us a bit more about the broadcast landscape in general. What's going on out there? What are the new shows that have maybe popped up this year in the build up to COP26, or just as climate change becomes more of a, excuse the pun, hot topic? So yeah, joining us now, Liv, please, can you tell us a bit about that? What are the new shows that have launched this year? And what can you tell us about what they're after from a PR perspective?
Yes, sure. So hello, everyone, and thank you for having me, Dan. So the last 6 months, as I'm sure everyone is aware, have just been explosive in terms of environmental stories, new reports that are being launched. And I think we can all see for businesses, consumers, government, hopefully it's becoming a real priority on everyone's agenda in terms of your everyday kind of activity, how sustainable you are as an individual, but also looking to brands and businesses as the kind of leaders helping to kind of guide us and give us the opportunity to make those choices. So yeah, in the last 6 months, there's been a huge catalyst in terms of broadcast PR opportunity, as so many broadcasters across kind of radio, TV and podcast are all kind of creating these programs, shows, episodes all dedicated to climate change and sustainability, which is obviously a huge opportunity for us and brands across the UK and the globe. So particularly for us, the Sky News Daily Climate Show launched in April, which was massive as it was the first ever daily news show which was completely dedicated to climate change. So a huge opportunity again for audiences, brands to kind of get on the radar and to demonstrate exactly what they're doing in this space. And there's lots of opportunity to do so just because they have a couple of shows a day. So that's Monday to Friday. And it kind of comes on, I think it's between 6:30 and 9:30 each day. So again, having that touch point throughout the day, throughout the week, we have the scope there to approach them and say, actually, on Friday for your slot, if this is an area of interest, this brand is what they're covering, and we have the CEO available. And then more widely, Times they've launched their first ever digital hub, which is called, oh, sorry, there's some drilling outside the office, hopefully you can still hear me. But yes, the Times launched Times Earth, which is a digital hub. So that goes across their social media, across their website, and also kind of a dedicated section in their editorial space. So that Times Earth there, they have like insight, they cover research, stories, and again, interviews with business leaders and celebrities working in the environmental space. So lots of chance there to approach them and across lots of different platforms, which is obviously great for us. And then across radio, BBC Radio 4, The World Tonight, their programme, in the lead up to COP26, they actually launched a regular kind of hourly slot every evening that is, again, just climate news dedicated. So in the evening, we found that lots more people, specifically with radio, it's a quiet time for people to reflect and engage. So I think they obviously saw that as a chance to reach people when they're feeling perhaps the most reflective about their everyday choices and perhaps more susceptible to be taking in, you know, insight about businesses. So again, that's kind of a daily chance to touch in and see what's going on around the world in the environment. And then recently, I think it was last week, the UN launched a brand new podcast on their kind of scope, which is called No Denying It. And as it sounds, that was basically targeted at the deniers of climate change across the globe, being quite frank and kind of saying, you know, these are the facts and the figures. Again, they're quite statistic-led and research and insight-driven, which is really valuable. And I think it's a 10 series podcast also. So yeah, lots of opportunities to kind of keep in touch and also valuable. I think they want to reach commuters on the way to work, listening to podcasts, but also business leaders who can, you know, take those statistics and use them to perhaps look at their own strategy internally and what they could be doing differently to make a change in the space.
That's great. Really, really useful insights there, Liv. And just to say, if anybody has any questions, again, for Liv or Tessa, please enter them in the chat box or Q&A box during this session, and we'll probably come to those later on, or if they're pertinent to something addressed now, we can try and introduce it. Equally, if anybody has any questions about any of the shows or stations that Liv mentions or that gets discussed today, please feel free to follow up with myself or Liv afterwards. Also, just to say, it's incredibly unlucky if there is drilling going on in the street next to Liv, because she's travelled into the office this morning, bless her, because there was some roadworks or some building work going on near her home. So it seems particularly unfortunate if she's now been confronted with that in the office. So thank you for persevering with that, Liv. Useful to know then what's kind of happened and what's launched over the last few months. Can we have a bit of insight then about the kind of stories that these and other programs are taking, and do we have any insights in terms of what they've said thereafter moving forward, or any advice for our audience today on what kind of stories to pitch?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Marketeers, we often, you know, we're on the phone to broadcasters every single day throughout the week, come rain or shine. So there's always opportunity there to speak to people and say, actually, what do you think your, you know, focus is this week, or are there any stories that you have appetite for, that type of thing. So just in the last week, we've spoken to people like BBC Morning Live, who have said specifically to us that actually they're looking to get organised in the next couple of weeks. So they kind of like to have stories 1 or 2 weeks ahead, and their kind of series is finishing early October, and they said their schedule's already starting to fill up. So that's just something to bear in mind in the lead up to COP26 and things like that. Broadcasters already have it on the radar. LBC News have you know, similarly said they're kind of inundated with the news agenda at the moment, but again, that doesn't mean that there isn't opportunity there. They often like to cover environmental stories like related to the news agenda, but James O'Brien specifically said that they want to be on the ground for COP26 speaking to business leaders and kind of finding out what people are doing in the run-up. So it's certainly on their kind of agenda and something that they have appetite to be speaking about. They do have a preference in celebrities sometimes, so the likes of Chris Packham we might think might go down well at LBC News, but equally they said, you know, with environmental experts, I think they're looking for kind of more science driven as opposed to celebrity. So again, it's just nice to be in conversation with those types of broadcasters, just so that's something that we're wary of. If we kind of have a campaign coming up, we know what they'd be looking for. Equally, Channel 4, we spoke to them on Friday, and they were telling us that they are looking for human interest stories, so related to environmental drilling. related to the environment, but they're looking on how that impacts the kind of everyday consumer. And yeah, it kind of needs to have that real personal touch with them, as I think, again, they're quite a reflective broadcaster, and they like to see, you know, come up with stories that are going to like make us think emotionally. And yeah, so, and they also they've been covering lots of like national environment stories, so and also the kind of more natural news stories, so looking at things like coastal erosion, whether it's the cliffs of Dover, those types of things, the ice caps melting. So yeah, they like a natural news hook. So again, if there's anything that businesses are doing in relation to their impact, their kind of, you know, carbon offsetting, or whether they're working to be carbon neutral, again, that's really nice, so that we can go in and tie that in with the natural news agenda to say, you know what, you know, this is happening, this report came out last night, this is clearly a problem, but this is how everyday businesses are working themselves to combat it in their strategies internally.
Great stuff. Thanks, Liv. We're going to let the builders do a bit more work now and give you a bit of a break and come to you, Tessa, if that's okay. And then perhaps, Liv, we could come back to you to ask you a bit about some of the new plans in place for the next 50 days. I believe it's 50 days to COP26 from this weekend, so it is fast approaching. Also, we're going to ask you, Liv, a bit about some of the projects you've worked on and the kind of successes you've had year to date. But Tessa, if we could come to you now, please. And just for the benefit of our audience, can you tell us a bit about CNBC and your role, please?
Yeah, sure. So CNBC is the preeminent business channel across digital, TV, and social media. And we have viewers from day traders to CEOs to government officials to, you know, your at-home investor. We define our audience into two groups. So we have the influential, which is the CEOs, CFOs, CMOs, and well-known business leaders on the planet. These are predominantly our TV and digital audience, but we also have a growing aspirational group. So this is the younger, more millennial audience who are consuming us on social and CNBC.com to ultimately help them look smart as they climb up their ladder. I mean, I like to say that it's our job to help these guys get ahead. So CNBC, you may be forgiven, is thinking we're an American network, especially here in the UK. But that's not the case. Our TV network and our coverage, you know, moves the markets globally. CNBC starts a day over in Asia with our coverage there. We pick up here in Europe before passing over to the US. So we are truly an international business channel. So here in Europe, just so you guys know, we are live on air from 6 a.m. in the morning to 10 a.m. So that's Squawk Box at 6 to 9 a.m. and then Street Signs Europe at 9 to 10 a.m. And that's when we hand over to our colleagues in the US, where they have worldwide exchange. So for myself, I'm news editor for strategic relationships at CNBC. I lead the booking teams, or as we call it, the input team, for Europe. I also look after some of our key strategic relationships across the globe, booking CNBC editorial panels and also non-live editorial events, so news, editorial, and so pretty much across the board here at CNBC. Just so you know, our role at the news desk is helping to create the news agenda. So we bring our guests those influential and aspirational views, what they kind of want to watch. Generally for us though, it's like getting the CEOs, companies, business leaders, government officials when the news breaks. And we do achieve that on a daily basis. And just to put it out there now is that CNBC, whenever we do an interview, because we are the first in business worldwide, we do expect the first interview one does on a certain subject, or exclusive, we always like, but for us, if it's not first, unfortunately, we generally cannot do that. So a bit about us and our role.
That's useful to know, I think, for the audience here, certainly if they're thinking about
at first it's a must. There's no way of getting around it. You should, some of the people I've had to say no to, you would be surprised.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Well, more to follow potentially on that. And then in terms of sustainable future, which I mentioned earlier, can you tell us a bit about what exactly that is, what it entails, and how your ESG Council relates to that?
Perfect, excellent. So as you mentioned, we launched our ESG Council and our Sustainable Future Initiative back in April. You know, our viewers were seeing an increased demand for ESG related stories. And I believe we were, an early leader in coverage for this for broadcast media. So our sustainable future coverage is a destination of tracking how smart investments, new investment ideas, tech innovations can generate business for now and for the future. So we've split our coverage generally into our 5 editorial pillars on this coverage. So we look at it from 5 different angles, which first one is money investing. So this is how money flows can help influence the way we treat the planet. So carbon trading, green bonds, etc. So that's one of our segments. We also have, second one is responsibility and regulation. So this is we break down the demographics of change, laws and regulation that help can guide us to sustainable future within ESG as well. We also look at technology and innovation. So the people at the forefront of digital research and development, exploring how technology works and how this works for bettering the environmental benefits for everyone. We also take a look at energy sector, so providing energy, we call it. So we're looking at the energy transition, the role of incumbent energy providers will play in the future, startups that are looking to change the business, change the industry one step at a time. And then we also take a look at industry response. So that's general industry and how they are moving forward to meet their goals, obviously the 2050 carbon goals, etc., going forward. And that's a variety of sectors that we cover globally. So as I mentioned, we did launch our ESG Council. That is consistent. We've got over 50 CEOs and chairpeople from around the world on a breadth of industries that they're able to share their insights with CNBC audience, global audience, on air, at events and online, and it is only C-level. So that's CEO or chairperson kind of level. Some of our members, just to name a few, we have CEOs from HSBC, Credit Suisse, Nissan, and Financial over in China. We have Paul Polman, who's former CEO of Unilever, and he's quite at the forefront of a lot of these changes within businesses. And we have a couple of celebrities or two. If you guys know Formula One, Nico Rosberg is also on our council. He does a lot around green tech for the sport. So that's quite interesting. So yeah, we're really doing a lot more in this because we're responding to our viewers' need to want to know more about ESG.
And do the ESG Council members, are they go-to commentators for breaking news, and/or would you look further afield automatically anyway? Just thinking about the opportunities for our viewers here.
Yeah, so basically the ESG Council members, they're our council. They join us on regular basis when they have breaking news. So for example, today, if you watched our program, we had the CEO of Nestle, Jeff Cutmore, jetted over to Lucerne to discuss about their 2050 carbon roadmap, and also they were talking around regenerative farming and kind of how they're looking at kind of building it from the base up. But we also do cover other stories, non-CF ESG Council members. I mean, I can explain to you now or later about what coverage we have, but our ESG Council members, generally they have something to announce, they come to us first.
I think we'll definitely come on to the kind of stories you've covered recently and the guests maybe outside of the council to highlight that point. Quick question from Helen that's just come in on the chat. She's curious to know if the ESG Council is fixed, or is there scope for potential CEOs to be added to that? Is it one in, one out, or is it something which could be expanded in the build-up?
No, definitely. It is worth expanding. It has to be. Our council is the FTSE 100s, the CAC 40 kind of leaders globally. So we do curate the list. We are open to new members. There should be a couple more members joining shortly. But it is, we have to check them first, and we have to make sure that they're of the caliber of the other council members. You can take a look at the council with just type in CNBC ESG Council, and there's a list of who's part of that.
Right, and that'd be the good steer, as you say, in terms of the caliber of people already on the council, and if you want to be part of it, you've got to be up to scratch, I guess, on
No
a par
pressure.
with them for sure. So you gave us that kind of the key pillars of your editorial guidance and the kind of topics and stories you want to cover. Can you give us a little bit more specificity in that regard? So any flavour of the kind of stories or guests you've had on in recent weeks, please.
Yeah, sure. So as I just mentioned, we spoke to the CEO of Nestle, Mark Schneider, today. We've also spoken to a lot of our council members, like Zurich Insurance came on earlier this week. They announced their sustainability pledges, so he came on to us first. We've been speaking to Lord Turner, so the chairman of Energy Transition Commissions, and loads of former government positions for us. We also spoke to Remy Eriksson of DNV, their annual report on energy transition. We also speak to a lot of people around heads of sustainabilities, ESG topics, etc. over the past couple of months. So it falls into our editorial pillars. So we discuss, obviously for us, C-level is very important, but we do speak to heads of sustainability. So don't be scared. We do cover a variety of issues at CNBC.
What about in terms of the best way to approach you? If some of our audience think they have the right guest, C-suite level and or head of sustainability, that kind of title, they feel they have a strong, compelling story, what advice would you give to them in terms of how best to approach you? Is it an email? Is it a press release? What are the other assets they need? I mean, obviously at Marketeers, we always make sure we've got details of a spokesperson, availability, contact details, but what other assets might be useful, particularly for your show or shows?
Definitely. We're always busy. I would say email, but do remember we get hundreds of emails a day with a variety of pictures. So try and make it stand out. Just a press release, I would say an overload of information can be a bit intense when you're looking at things. So key, succinct, headline points is always nice. The guest name as well is always nice to put up quite high. And just don't be insulted if I don't get back straight away, or we don't. It's TV is always busy. There's never a dull moment. You can call. It's a bit trickier these days, obviously, with the whole remote working. If you do want to have a chat about it, you can drop us an email and say, hey, you around free for a quick chat. We also, all the other our team members are working on this as well. But I would say for us, just because of the nature of our work, emails, mornings we're super busy because that's when our shows are on. So if you send something in the morning, don't be worried. If you're pitching for the next day, do not pitch in the afternoon because our shows get set every day. We have our meeting at around anywhere between 10:15 and 10:30. So if you have something for the next day, I would get that in early and maybe highlight in the subject interview for tomorrow. I just say lay things out as simply as possible. If we're interested, we'll ask for more information, because generally if you have a highlight or a paragraph at the top that is interesting and we know what we're doing, we know what we've covered, we don't need to explain about what it's about, we just need to know what they're happy to talk about. And I would suggest, while you have, say, a story on a specific sustainable topic, we do like to talk about an industry holistically, for example. So if you're talking about a certain, like, let's go to Nestle today. I mean, he's quite top, but we're talking about their regenerative farming. But then we got into further discussions on supply chain and the impact of that on their business. And obviously, because they're mentioning about COVID and how climate change also plays into that. So always think that it's not just going to be narrow on one topic. Try and think of the other outside things that could also add to your peg, like what's the big thing in the news at the moment. So for us, inflation outlook, it's supply chain crunches, it's outlook, etc. So try and think holistically, not just quite narrow on the topic you're pitching over to us.
That's great advice, and that plays to the credibility of the guest that's being pitched in the first place. They may know an awful lot about the story that you're pitching, but actually they need to look, think beyond that.
How it fits into the broader context, and also if you offer a guest, please make sure the guest's available.
Cool. And I was going to say as well, given your audience, is it important to have an international angle as well? If it's a purely UK story and a UK job title, does that present a bit of a problem for you, or does it come down to the strength of the story?
It's twofold. It really depends on the strength of the story, but we are not as we're not as domestic, say for example, as your local broadcasters. Our audience is global. So what I like to say to people is that you need to think, if you're sitting in Germany, which is our next biggest market in EMEA aside from the UK, would you be interested in this story? So very niche, specific to the UK, not so much. But if you could bring it into the broader context on Europe or Asia or the US, then that's more likely to get through for us.
Great. There's a question coming as well, which is very much related to this. So we're going to field it now. One of our audience has asked about your interest in scientists or ex-government advisors and similar, and also what is the best way to position a spokesperson, not necessarily to talk about a story which is attached to that pitch, but to be one of the first in line if you need a go-to commentator for reactive comment.
Yeah, definitely always interested in government commentators. Definitely, I would have said between April and now, it's more on, events driven, but as we're heading up towards COP, I think that's always interesting to discuss with people, especially around the government, because as we're coming closer to COP, we know this is more of the government initiative as well as through business. I would suggest emailing us here at CNBC and just giving us a heads up, really, because what I like is, you explain who the person is, what the topics they can talk about, can they do Zoom, and then when something comes up, you'll be our go-to person. So generally when news breaks, I think, oh, who can I have to talk on this subject? And you either remember, or we have lists, and then we'll say, drop an email randomly out of blue saying, hey, is that person available?
So a mini bio, a kind of snapshot of their expertise, what they can comment on would be useful.
Yeah, definitely, to say, hey, and also to, I would suggest that if you think, oh, CNBC is ignoring us, or we haven't had this guest in a while, just drop us an email and say, hey, just to let you know, XYZ is still available, happy to talk on these subjects, let me know if you're free, because we do get it. The amount of people we have on the shows globally is quite a lot. So it's not intentional if we don't get that person back. It's just sometimes it's nice to be reminded who you have, who's available, and what they can kind of talk about.
Brilliant. Well, one final question from me before we come back to Liv for some maybe examples of projects that she's worked on this year, and then kind of why or how they've worked, and then we'll open it up to a broader Q&A for anybody else who's been shy today and has a question for either Liv, Tessa, or myself. So last question, Tessa, for yourself, and you kind of nodded to it a moment ago. How are you preparing for COP26? What does the build-up look like for you in terms of programming? What are your plans to cover the event? And of course, climate change as a topic certainly doesn't go away afterwards. So what does the rest of this year look like from your point of view?
Perfect, excellent. So we will be starting a Road to COP coverage from the 4th of October. It will be every Monday from around 8:30 to 8:45, and these would be, Director of Sustainabilities or any kind of, senior person of their game to discuss obviously COP and climate and outlook, etc. We also do a regular segment with more C-level guests on a Friday, and we've been doing that since April, and also so we're currently doing that at the moment. It's called under our broader Sustainable Future brand. So, and that's breaking news or a survey coming out, or a CEO who wants to highlight a specific story, for example. But that's not saying we don't do things outside of those two times. If there is something worthy, interesting to cover, or C-level, or some big report coming out, we do have opportunities throughout the week for shows. So don't be afraid thinking, oh, well, it's not a Monday or Friday, they won't cover it. We are, as I said earlier, this is a key editorial focus for us at CNBC. So we are a lot more open to putting guests throughout our shows as part of our regular coverage. We're not having it we have the branding of Sustainable Future, but that's integrated into our daily shows. We'll also be we're looking at attending COP. Obviously this depends on COVID and what happens with that. So I'm saying to everyone, this is our ideal plan, and it really depends on what happens over the next couple of weeks. So we're looking at spending the whole 2 weeks up in Glasgow for COP. As I said, it's a key focus for us at the moment. And we will, COVID dependent, we'll hopefully have a set potentially somewhere in the blue zone, potential roaming cameras. We'll have anchors and crew up there a lot. So we are looking at covering, we're looking at kind of if any of you guys know our Davos coverage that we do, we're kind of, keeping that in mind on how we're going to cover it. So hopefully we'll be able to have a good big presence, but obviously it depends on COVID. So we will be there. That will definitely be C-level and first interviews as well, or exclusive.
Got it, love it. I think stylistically, the Davos reference is a really useful one, because I think a lot of that content's still available on your website. So if any of our audience want to seek that out and see how the Davos has been covered previously by CNBC, I'd recommend doing so. And I think
definitely not last year.
Okay, yeah, of course. And I was going to say, COVID dependent is an asterisk against everything that we're saying.
2020 Davos coverage, take a look.
Look at that. And then I guess, Liv, again, I keep saying we're going to come to you and ask about some of the projects you've worked on, but I think it links quite naturally to what Tessa was just saying. Do you have any insights from broadcasters about how they're going to be covering the build up to COP26 and the event itself? And are there new shows or formats going to be launching which might be useful for some of our audience to have in mind?
Absolutely. So I think it's safe to say that all of the shows and programming that has been launching over the last 6 months is in the lead up to COP. I think that everyone's got it on their mind. So everything that's running in the period between now and COP26, we can just safely assume that's going to be the way that they're going to be continuing to cover it. But it was actually announced last week that Bloomberg, obviously one of the world's leading business and financial, one of Tessa, one of the world's biggest leading financial broadcasters, and they're going to be again one of the official partners of COP26. So we found that they're going to be providing business leaders and audiences with that kind of expert insight there that they're going to be gathering. And again, they're very much looking to be on the ground reporting from Glasgow. So we expect to see lots from them in the coming weeks. BBC, they've also announced they're going to be launching a festival dedicated to COP26, but it's specifically going to be for media, those working in the media who can attend. So again, looking at ways to cover the story, there's going to be BBC correspondents there, basically teaching those working in media how we should be approaching climate change in the upcoming months. And obviously looking ahead to the next few years, how we expect the landscape to evolve and grow. So again, that looks like a really good festival that we can get involved with. If anyone has any other questions about it, we'll be happy to provide some links. But yeah, that's just one of the ways. Obviously, BBC are the most trusted broadcaster in the UK specifically. So it's great to see that they're doing something for people like us working in the media also. And then looking to kind of other events, Expo 2020 is certainly another one that we have on the radar, specifically at Marketeers. So for those of you who don't know, Expo is a kind of universal exhibition in Dubai. It's Expo 2020 this year, so it's going to be starting in October, and that runs till March. But they have a massive sustainability focus as an event also. So they're going to have their own sustainability pavilion. They're going to be covering lots of issues around, kind of natural environmental stories, carbon offsetting, that type of thing, the supply chain, as Tessa rightly mentioned earlier. So yeah, that's going to be something big. But we've also heard that CNN are going to be their official partner for that. So again, they're going to be on the ground in Dubai. They're going to be covering the story. They're going to have correspondents who are looking for those expert voices to be speaking across the event. And we see kind of the first couple of weeks of Expo specifically, there's going to have so much going on. So if you are a brand or business that has someone that there could be a voice, then that's definitely something to look into, because again, that's going to be a very big opportunity.
That's great. Thanks, Liv. I think in terms of those insights, at Marketeers, Liv does a fantastic job of compiling and coordinating a newsletter, which we produce monthly, or I should say she produces monthly. I'm trying to steal your thunder there. So if anybody would like to subscribe to that newsletter, if you want to drop myself or Liv an email after this, it's firstname.surname@marketeers.com, or you can get us through the PRCA website. Of course, we are official broadcast partners to the PRCA. So yeah, do drop us a line and we'll be happy to add you to the distribution list for that. And each month you'll get some real key insights in terms of what broadcasters are doing, what new shows are out there, and everything associated with that. In terms of opening up to the wider group, we've got a few more minutes, so we will open it up to anybody else who has any questions. So just a reminder, if you didn't hear earlier, please pop any questions you have into the Q&A box or into the chat box, and we'll do our best to answer either now or as a follow-up. But just I guess finally, Liv, in terms of the kind of projects and stories that you personally worked on, you've shared some insights in terms of what broadly TV, radio and podcasts are after, but do you have any kind of proof points of success from this year where you've worked on climate change or sustainability related stories where you think it might be useful to share with the group, because it just shows what works.
Yeah, definitely. So I think for brands and businesses, there's a huge scope and variety of choice there, depending on what kind of story and what your narrative is. So as an example, on the 9th of August, we worked with the CDP, and that was on the launch of the IPCC report, which I'm sure many of you saw, and the headline was kind of, blasted all over the papers, claiming, or, rightly saying that it's going to be, we're looking at climate change as a kind of code red, and that's been our impact over the last few years. So we saw that was covered broadly across print and online, but also broadcast. So this is a kind of example of the reactive news agenda that we were speaking about earlier. So as CDP, they're obviously experts in the space. We used the organisation as a chance to, jump off the back of that, launch. They had their own personal take on it as an organisation, as a business. So we were able to then use their insight and say, so we know this report is coming up. We knew it, we were aware of it days prior. So we were able to then use two of their top, most senior spokespeople, come to broadcasters with a fresh take and say, this is a financial opinion on the subject. And the results kind of spoke for themselves. Obviously, we kind of secured coverage across Reuters, BBC World TV, and BBC World Service, and that type of thing. So again, that was a very kind of reactive news moment that we were able to use their expert opinion on. So that's kind of one take. And again, although it was covered like very broadly, we were kind of looking at the more business, like news-driven media. So that had a very hard news line naturally. But also another brand that we work with and continue to over the last year has been the L'Oreal Group. So obviously, so many brands come under that name. You've got Maybelline, Garnier, L'Oreal Paris, the list kind of goes on. So again, as a really consumer facing and a household name, there's a lot of scope there to be looking at their business and what the brands under that umbrella are doing to kind of make those choices easier for consumers. So yeah, over the last few months and the last couple of weeks specifically, we were working with their global brand president, Adrian Koskas, and that's something that they're very keen to do. They like to profile their spokespeople and kind of use him as the expert voice. So over the last 6 months, we've been working to put him in the place of the kind of top business positions around the world and have his take on it. So they were talking about their 2025 targets and what they intend to do as a brand. So yeah, we were able to kind of position him across CGTN. Again, the BBC stations absolutely loved him. Eurovision took an interview with him, and just again, although he is a business leader and it has that business news line, there's also that consumer interest there and the appetite. So how is this trickling down your internal strategy, and how is that going to make everyday choices much easier for consumers? So two very different kind of stories, but absolutely achieved kind of international coverage. So there is definitely appetite for those speakers.
Love that. That's fantastic. And for those unaware, Eurovision is a news bureau seeding content across Europe, not the song contest.
Should have explained.
We'd love to get clients on there where appropriate as well. Fantastic, Liv. Thanks so much for that. And Tessa, thank you so much again for all that great insight in terms of what's going on the CNBC side. We're pretty much at time now, but if anybody does have any questions they want to quickly add to the Q&A box or chat box, then please do. Going to do a little countdown. Just again, a reminder, if you want to subscribe to that newsletter, The Loop, please drop Liv or myself a note. And then just a call out, I guess, for somebody else on the PRCA Council. We've talked a lot about coverage and how to kind of access or penetrate the news agenda with your stories and your guests today, but we haven't really talked about actual behaviour change, which I kind of nodded to at the start. And just a call out for John Brown from Don't Cry Wolf, who has previously done a great presentation for the PRCA about kind of behavioural economics and the kind of stories to tell and how to tell them, in terms of actually generating that nudge psychology to get people to behave in a better way, which I think is a crucial part of this conversation, which we haven't really had much time to go into today. So definitely seek that out via John or the PRCA if you haven't already seen it. And it looks like we haven't got any other questions. So thank you so much for everybody who joined today. Really appreciate everyone's time and staying for the end. Once again, a massive thank you to Liv and Tessa for those great insights. Hopefully see you at another PRCA. Oh, we have a chat question. Let me just check. See if so thank you. It's not a question. Absolute pleasure. And thank you again for everyone's time, and hopefully see you again at another PRCA broadcast group event. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. See you later.